Now, the top story tonight, the Senate is debating a voting rights bill, thrusting the reluctant hero, Senator Joe Manchin, back into the fighting ring for one more round against democracy. He offered a compromise proposal last week that received glowing ambivalence from Stacey Abrams.
What Senator Manchin is putting forward are some basic building blocks that we need to ensure that democracy is accessible no matter your geography.
That endorsement from a liberal champion sent the bill on a rocket ride, unfortunately the SpaceX version.
Kaboom.
According to Politico, the dirty secret in Washington is that many high-level Democrats are not wildly enthusiastic about the massive voting rights, political reform, and government ethics bill. Congressman, why can't Democrats be allowed to serve out their term without having to bend to the tyrannical will of their voting-obsessed constituents?
You know, the right to vote is really under attack in this country, through many voter suppression bills that will make it much harder for people to vote. And I certainly hope my Republican friends will come around to supporting these bills to strengthen our democracy.
You know, there are plenty of upsides to voter suppression. A lot of progressive movement building happens in those 8 hours spent waiting in line.
Republicans understand that people throughout history have died for the right to vote, and it honors their memory to make people continue doing so.
I don't see what the big deal is. I've never voted, and my life is great.
That's because no matter who wins, we win.
I guess that's a pretty good system. You're saying that Sean Connery played an older version of James Bond in The Rock?
That's the rumor.
I'm sorry, I know we weren't going to talk about it.
Now, moving on, the infrastructure bill remains stalled as both parties argue about who will pay for the roads, rich people or people whose work and home is their car. Here's moralizing Republican senator with no prostitution scandals, Lindsey Graham, sharing a bold new idea for how to pull it off: tax the poor.
But the gas tax hasn't been adjusted for inflation, the federal gas tax, since the 1990s. I would be willing to do that. So I would just say to President Biden, you've got a party that's divided. You've got a Republican Party that's willing to meet you in the middle for $1 trillion of infrastructure.
The middle here being Biden accepting an unpopular provision and Republicans accepting everything they want. Congressman, why hasn't Biden considered getting rid of Medicaid to pay for roads yet?
Well, I think what has to happen is that we have to negotiate in good faith. The gas tax hasn't even been adjusted for inflation since the Clinton administration. So many of us are open to it.
Let me just say I agree. Historically, people have responded to increases at the gas pump by acting rationally and agreeing it's their civic duty.
If Americans want bridges so badly, they ought to be willing to burn $20 of unleaded to get across one.
Sure.
Now, here's what I'm predicting. Once poor Americans start getting busted during their 3-hour commutes for broken taillights they couldn't fix because of higher gas taxes, they'll appreciate how the road the cops smash their faces into are a little bit smoother now.
Oh, it's going to feel like velvet against that cheek. Now, moving on, the House Speaker does not have to be a member of Congress, so some Republicans have expressed interest in electing Donald Trump to that position in the latest scheme to reinstate the guy who almost murdered them. Here's Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy putting this idea to rest by saying their God King commands it.
Would you be for President Trump becoming Speaker?
I've talked to President Trump many times. He tells me he wants to be Speaker, and I think he should be President.
Now, to be fair, a lot more people would watch Biden's State of the Union if a Sudafed Trump was behind him doing a phoner with Sean Hannity. Congressman, for the sake of bringing this country together, can you see yourself supporting Donald Trump for Speaker?
Absolutely not. First of all, the Republicans have to win back the House for that to even be a possibility. And so far, I don't think they're doing a good job of making it happen. If they do win it back, they could do much better than Donald Trump. His presidency was a disaster.
Donald Trump's son is what you mean.
Look, his presidency was a complete disaster. The Republican Party has declined under his leadership.
A Trump speakership makes sense. This would help him familiarize himself with all the exits for the next Capitol riot.
Wait a minute, there's no requirements to be Speaker of the House? Why didn't I do that for a summer job instead of all that lifeguard training?
Because, Junior, this is your summer job, remember? Now, moving on, full-time media personality and occasional infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci is fighting back against the right's mischaracterizations of him the best way he knows how on the New York Times podcast Sway.
So the people who are giving the ad hominems are saying, Fauci misled us. First he said no masks, then he said mask. Well, let me give you a flash. That's the way science works. You work with the data you have at the time.
That's right, Doc. You tell those conservatives listening to the New York Times podcast Sway that there's merit to a nuanced response to evolving data. Congressman, it's clear Fauci's star is rising faster than science. How long till he drops science altogether and goes solo?
Well, Dr. Fauci is one of our nation's leading infectious disease experts. He has decades of experience. He was really a voice of reason and stability and comfort during the darkest days of our pandemic.
And Hollywood's
Yet,
hottest
despite
item.
all of this, his name has been dragged through the mud by people who have been wrong about COVID-19 at every turn.
I like Fauci because he can be funny, but he can also be a doctor.
Sure.
I'd argue that Fauci should be sitting right next to Kelly Ripa every morning, but first, he needs to broaden his audience by going on elite tech podcasts and making amends with the right-wingers that want him dead.